to be appointed as a moderator for this session. Allow me to introduce myself. So I am Adiat Masrega, as the MC has told you previously, and I will be with you in the next roughly one hour and 30 minutes ahead. And it is my pleasure to call the three speakers for this session. And this is my colleague and friend, Dr. Raden Muhammad Purnagunawan. Will you take the stage, please? And also the General Manager of PBMT Social Ventures, Mr. Jamil Abbas. And lastly, of course, my colleague and friend as well, Dr. Dian Mashita. So these three speakers will present each for roughly around 20 minutes, yeah? And then we still have some times for discussion if there are questions from you. And then, of course, we need to go for our Friday prayer, yeah? So let us start then with Bapak Purnagunawan. Are you okay? Ready? Okay, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Adi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I want to thank the Jess and also all the speakers here. And it is really an honor for me to speak here. So what I'm going to present here is more to set the context in the poverty elevation in Indonesia. Yeah, because I think most of the Islamic majority countries still in this developing stage. So I think the problems may be the same with Indonesia. So I'm going to talk more about this how actually the poverty in Indonesia evolved since 1970s, and then how the government programs to accelerate the poverty reduction in Indonesia, and what's the challenges ahead. So as we can see, actually Indonesia has quite did well in reducing poverty. Right? It decreased significantly, especially if you look at the numbers from the 70s, which is like 40% of the population is poor. Right? But when the crisis strikes, the poverty rise again, double. And after that, it is decreasing, but the pace is slowing down. The pace is slowing down. The number of poor people decreasing. The number of poor people decreasing, but it's not enough. It's not enough for all. And we also see that this poverty rate varies significantly between areas, between provinces. In some area, we have like 28% of the population is defined as poor, based on this provincial poverty line. Right? But then in some other area, just like in Jakarta, they only have small number of poor people. So we still have also problems with inequality here of growth. Right? And when we look in details, even in some rich area, we still see pockets of poor people within this area. If we look at the province, the districts, even in the municipalities, we can see that there is some areas that the poor people actually located. Right? And when we talk about the poor, especially in Indonesia, and I think also the same with the developing countries, we tend to have the skew in income distribution. Right? So if we look at the graph here, most of the people actually living near the poverty line. So even though we already have like 11% of poor people only in Indonesia. But if we just increase the number of the poverty line, it will double, even triple the numbers of poor people. So those poor people are really, really vulnerable to shock. They can easily become poor, right? Then, especially those 40% and below. And these people, yeah, also easily move in and out of poverty. So just like this, some study from Semeru in 2011. So in 2008, those categorized as poor people actually become not poor, right? And it's 53% of the poor. So you can imagine, half of them actually graduated, not being poor again. Right? But the problem is that those who previously not poor becoming poor, and the number is 49%. So we can see that the dynamics of the poor to get into the poverty and out of the poverty is dynamics, really dynamics. Right? So any shocks that can happen to them can easily make them to become poor, or something that actually benefit them can easily move them out of the poverty. Right? So that's the problems with the poverty, and especially with the relative property that we have in Indonesia that we use. So when you look at this, right, and previously I said that the people is easily move in and out, and then the problems again is that it's quite hard to differentiate and khusus. So if you face with these two house, which one do you think deserve the social assistance from the governments most? The picture on the left or the right? Certainly you're gonna say it's on the left, yeah. But that's only one. If you look at here, okay, the household head working as ojek driver. So maybe you have also, no, this is just the informal type of transportation using bicycle, motorbike, right? And the household head in the second is a teacher. When you look at again in this information, you're gonna say, oh, certainly the one on the left is more eligible than the one on the right. But if you look at the other household member, the housewife, the spouse working as a teacher, and they only have one son. In here, the wife doesn't work, and they have a lot of kids. Right? So, if we calculate all of them, maybe the one on the right deserves the social assistance more than the left. And that's only like what? 1, 2, 3 categories. When we define the poor, we can define with a lot of deprivation that they can have, like access to sanitation, access to health, access to clean water, and so on and so forth. Right. And when we talk about the poor people, we didn't say that they are lazy. No. Most of the poor people actually work. Right? 60% of them working. Yeah. But the problem is that the job that they have doesn't have the capacities or enough to make them out of poverty. Right? So the job that they have is not decent enough. Doesn't give enough to get better educations, right, or anything to their children. And it's actually quite the same with urban and rural. But in urban, the challenges is a bit hard because there's a quite fierce interaction, right, between those looking for jobs. Yeah, job opportunity is high in rural area, but competition is high also. So it's become harder for them to get even the better jobs. And it's not only the problems in Indonesia. The working poor problems, I think, in every countries, right? We can see here the blue line here is the working poor. So they do work, they did everything they can, but still it's not enough. Right? It's not enough. So what's the problems with that? Why is it happening? First is that maybe they have unequal opportunity in the beginning. Right? Poor people usually doesn't have enough information to get what they deserve. They doesn't even know that maybe they can send their children to school free because they doesn't have information and nobody actually tell them. Also access to health and etc. Right? And when it's happened, it's gonna cost the entire family members, right? The child will become poor again in the future, and so on and so forth. But if we look at the Indonesia as a context, we didn't say that the poor doesn't improve at all. No, they improve. But the problem is that the increase in income or consumption of the rich is just much faster than the poor. So income inequality increasing. But the numbers actually now is better because we have quite lump numbers in here. So it means that some of the poor is actually getting higher growth in consumption. Yeah, by the way, in Indonesia, we calculate the poverty using consumption, not the income. So if you want to calculate the income, maybe the numbers will be higher than this, yeah, the income inequality. So we can see here, this is population that's okay. So if we order them based on the consumption, we see this picture, and we can see that those below the poverty lines only increase their consumption level by 2% in the period of 2008 to 2012, but the rich, they increased by more than 8%, right? But the number slightly improved in here. And those who actually the 40% below here have increased their consumption level by almost 5%. So it should be in the last years, the inequality is decreasing a bit. So how actually the government of Indonesia tried to do to reduce this poverty and inequality? So first, definitely, one sustainable way to reduce the poverty is to get them a decent job. Right? To get them a decent job. Whether they become entrepreneurs or they have formal works, that's the one thing. But also, the government has to do something to reduce the burden. So we do have these targeted social assistance programs for healthcare, education, conditional cash transfers, and also rice for the poor. Yeah, previously this is what happened. Only 30% of poor people actually receive those assistance. Yeah. This is in 2009. And only 10% of them actually receiving scholarship for the poor. So the poor people, 10% of them get the scholarships for the poor. So there is a big exclusion error in here. So what the government did? The government did targeting, better targeting. So they use a lot of methods to target, right? Mean testing, geographic testing, and so on and so forth. And we actually managed to create the unified database, actually to do census for the 40% below, those who have earned the bottom 40. Yeah. It includes 24.7 million households, 96.7 million individuals, and it's held in the Ministry of Social Affairs now. Right. It definitely reduced the inclusion and exclusion error, but not all, because still, in the process of getting the data, there is some problems. Right. Also, in the process of using it also, when we already want to have one programs, maybe the composition of the boards already changed, right? So that's also one thing. But using this, we already have a lot of programs that we have. So for the bottom 8%, we have this conditional cash transfers, what we call it program Keluarga Harapan. It gives a poor family, really poor family, extreme poor, a monthly, they give it every 3 months, right? A money that they can spend to anything, but they have conditionality. So they have to send their children to schools, and it will be checked. They have to have 80% of attendance, otherwise they're gonna cut the money, the transfer. They have to send the pregnant mothers to healthcare facilities. They have to have their children below 5 to go to the healthcare facilities, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of conditionality embedded in here, just to make sure that the poverty circles is gonna be cut in the long run. So those programs not gonna have a short-term impact, it's gonna have a long-term impact. And we also have this to several cards in here. For them to get like rice for the poor and other social assistance programs. So the bottom 25% is gonna have this one. Of course, we still have this inclusion error. Those who doesn't actually eligible get this, and also we also have this exclusion error. But yeah, that's still the one that the government want to eliminate. And we also have 30% of the population covered by the national health insurance. So the government actually paid for the premiums, right? And we still have not utilized the bottom 5. Right? So that's what the government did, right? And if you want to see the magnitudes, I'm sorry, it's in Bahasa because I just received it, the newest one. The coverage for the KPS, the cards, is like 15.5 million households, or 65.6 million people. So the coverage is quite high. And for this health, it's covered 86.4 million people. And on top of that, we have regional programs and also ministerial programs that also cover, try to accelerate poverty reductions. Right. So by doing that, we're gonna see that in the last years, we have both decreasing in Gini coefficient and also decreasing in poverty. Yeah. But it's not enough, as I said. Right. So maybe I'm gonna do it quite fast. So another way for the government to increase the livelihood of the poor, in addition to social assistance and other job programs, is to promote the financial inclusion. Right. So in Indonesia, approximately 80% of Indonesian poor have no access at all to formal financial services. So this is actually one big area that the Islamic systems actually can tap into. Right. If compared with these overalls, they use like 50%. 52%. That's for the overall of Indonesia, but for the poor it's only 21%. Access to financial services in Indonesia, right? Most of the poor is underserved, or they are using informal access, maybe loan shark and everything. So they are already vulnerables and becoming more vulnerable because they doesn't have a way to increase their assets. And also access to credits also still limited, right? Access to saving still quite high, but under every country, I think in Asia, the level of credits now is really low. It's cover only 17% of the population, right? While the microfinance institution only account for 10%. So there's a lot of room to improve in here. If you look at the statistic of small and medium enterprise, 60% of them actually doesn't want to get credit at all. Many of them related with religious belief or any other things, right? Because, or maybe they just doesn't find the financial instrument that really suit them. And if we improve this financial inclusive system, for sure, some studies says that it's gonna promote growth and also reduce poverty. And Indonesia just recently signed the National Strategy for Financial Inclusion in 1st of September 2016. And it has really ambitious target. We aim to have 75% coverage. Previously only 36% by Findex, but by 2019 we're gonna have, or we aim to have 75%. The governments do a lot of things, right? BI, OJK, and so on and so forth. But one thing that's now is in the process is reforming the way that the government disperse the fund or the assistance. They're gonna transform the rice for the poor, previously from bringing the rice into the house of the poor. Now they're gonna use the financial system to do it. So the poor can have this, at least the basic saving account, to increase their asset in the long run. So what challenges ahead? Challenges ahead, sure, we all know we have global economic slowdown and also the increasing of protectionism. So every country, because of this slowdown, just try to protect themselves, right? In addition, we have also the global rising inequality. which makes what risk of riots and so on and so forth, right? And also we have digital divide. Increasing in technology makes inequality even larger. Those who already have access to technology can gain more, while poor people who doesn't have access can be left behind, right? Especially also women in here. So what we can do? So actually, every one of us actually can be a connector, or maybe even super connectors. Just even to inform the poor, what can they have? What are their rights, right? Or even connect them with the proper financial services that's not gonna drag them down more to poverty and so on and so forth, right? And the second one is to control and supervise the governments, right? The irregularities, or as academics, we can analyze and get feedback. So the bottom line is we can all do to reduce the unequal opportunity that the poor have. By doing that, maybe we can reduce the poverty sooner. Thank you very much.